easing of restrictions might affect the spread of COVID? It's a crucial question, that, isn't it, Professor Mike Tildesley? We've spoken to you many, many times during the course of the pandemic. I mean, that's a very good question, isn't it? You make a change to travel, and the reason we've been cautious about that is because of the fear of bringing in or the spread. So why is it OK now?
Well, it's always a difficult balancing act because, of course, if you talk to an epidemiologist about the safest thing to do in any context, then, of course, you'd always be cautious. But we are at the stage now, of course, we've had restrictions in place for 18 months and more now. We have very high levels of vaccination in the United Kingdom, so it really is sort of a step to try to get back to normality, whilst, of course, still keeping some restrictions in place. We do need to remember that these travel restrictions do apply to people who are not double vaccinated. They will still have to follow precautions, take extra tests and isolate for 10 days upon return. So, of course, the risk is slightly going to increase, but it's a balancing act to support the travel sector.
Do you worry that lateral flow tests aren't as accurate and they don't offer as much detail as PCRs?
Well, of course, that's absolutely right. So the lateral flow test, so just to put this into context, if you get a positive from a lateral flow test, it has a very high, what we call specificity. So that means that true positives have a very high likelihood of showing up in a lateral flow test. The problem is the sensitivity of the test. So it is possible that you could test negative and in fact you are truly positive. So they are not as accurate as the PCR test. And I think what I would encourage people coming back, if they do get a negative on an LFT test, is, people do have LFT tests at home now, and a lot of people are testing regularly. So I would encourage people to maybe take them continuously for a few days just to determine that they really are truly negative.
So on the balance of where we are with the vaccine and with the boosters coming in over the winter, you think this is sensible?
Well, I think we do need to monitor it. I mean, clearly what the worry, of course, is what we don't want is to introduce a variant of concern into the UK, which maybe evades the vaccine and maybe puts in jeopardy our vaccine programme. Now, at the moment, this Delta variant is dominant in most countries around the world, and with high levels of vaccination, with good protection against the Delta variant, we're in quite a good position. But it does need careful monitoring, and if we do see variants of concern emerging in some countries, then it may be that the government need to look at that.
All change again,
So travel is one thing to talk about, but, I mean, there was a time when we would literally start our programmes every day with the number of cases and the number of deaths. Now, we become so accustomed to this every 24-hour number, but when you look at the most recent numbers, new cases, this was yesterday, over the 24-hour period, 40,701. Deaths over 24 hours, 122. Now, that figure has been steadily rising, but pretty consistent over at sort of 36,000, now up to 40,000 a day. I mean, is that just how this is going to be? Because it doesn't seem to be changing, and we know the vaccination rates are what they are. They're not going to get a whole lot higher.
Absolutely. So we have this situation, of course, where we have lifted most restrictions now. And so, of course, as you lift restrictions, that causes the R number to increase. But as you vaccinate more people, of course, that causes the R number to go down. And what we seem to have reached at the moment is a point where the R number is straddling about 1. And what that means is that, on average, every person who's infected infects about one other person, which is why you're seeing that these case rates have pretty much saturated for the last few weeks. Slightly more positively, what we are seeing is hospital admissions are still going down and deaths are still going down a little bit. But, of course, there's one eye on the winter. What's going to happen as we get into the colder weather? The virus tends to circulate a bit better in the winter and people tend to be mixing indoors more, of course.
And we'll be mixing indoors with the common flu out there as well. The concerns around the NHS at the moment, they are both happening at the same time for the first time. How worried are you about that and about flu jab uptake?
I think flu jab uptake is crucial, actually, and I know there has been there's been some discussion about this week, about the potential for a surge in flu this winter, because, of course, we didn't really have a flu season last year, so it is a huge concern, and I think we really need to encourage as many people as possible, not just to take the COVID vaccine if they haven't done already, but also to take the flu vaccine if they're offered it.
Because the flu can be really dangerous, can't it, for some demographics?
Oh, we need to remember, I mean, in a typical year, you get 10,000, 11,000 deaths from flu every year. Now, of course, we've not talked about this over the last 12 months because of the COVID pandemic. But, of course, flu in the winter can send a lot of people to hospital, and some people do sadly die from flu. So it is really important that people do take the flu vaccine.
To do both of them.
Mike, just go back to those numbers of the new cases. Are we at the stage